Know our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
Prime Minister Nadia El-Arbaoui, representing the President of the Republic Abdelmajid Tebboune, is participating today in the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development in Spain. And former diplomat and U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton has denounced Morocco's disinformation campaigns against the Polisario Front and some of its allies. And at least one Palestinian was killed in bombardments carried out today by the Israeli occupation against an aid distribution carried in a district of South Gaza. And those were the major developments. Now, the full news edition. Asya Bakar, good afternoon. Prime Minister Nadia El-Arbaoui is representing President Abdelmajid Tebboune today to the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, held in the presence of 70 heads of state and government, as well as the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres in Sevilla, Spain. Participants to the conference to last until next July 3rd will examine various issues related to the challenge of finance and development, particularly the state of implementation of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, which aims to support the implementation of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda with a view to formulating proposals and collective solutions capable of supporting development efforts and bridging the financing gap. And now the Minister of State in charge of Energy, Mines and Renewable Energies, Mohamed Arkab, has overseen here in Algiers the appointment of Samir Bakhti as the new president of the National Agency for the Development of Hydrocarbon Resources. Mr. Sharfi has the details.
In a speech delivered on the occasion, Mr. Arkab explained that this appointment is part of the dynamics experienced by the sector, particularly in the hydrocarbons sector, praising the central role of the Al Naft agency in developing hydrocarbon resources, encouraging investment and promoting oil and gas mining activity. The minister added that the appointment of Mr. Bakhti, one of the agency's most competent and experienced executives, reflects the state commitment to promoting national expertise and entrusting them with strategic responsibilities, reaffirming his full support for the new president in his new role. He also reiterated his support for all executives in the sector to continue the reform process and improve the agency's performance in implementing its strategy aimed at promoting upstream activities, developing oil fields, and strengthening Algeria's competitiveness as a destination for energy partnerships. At the end of his speech, Mr. Arkab emphasized the importance of the missions entrusted to the agency at this crucial stage, highlighting its role in strengthening transparency and efficiency in the management of resources, as well as in supporting the attractiveness of the Algerian mining sector for investment in line with the structural reforms introduced by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, within the framework of the new Hydrocarbons Law 1913 and the Investment Law 2218. Let's note that the new president of Al Naft has more than 20 years of experience in managing oil contracts and monitoring exploitation and production activities. Since 2011, he has held several senior positions with the National Agency for the Development of Hydrocarbon Resources, notably as head of the Contract Management Department and director of the Audit Department. He has also been a permanent member of the agency's board of directors since 2018.
And now the Speaker of the National People's Assembly, Mr. Ibrahim Boghali, has received the Speaker of the Constitutional Court of the Portuguese Republic, who is on an official visit to our country. Mariam Borshi has the details.
On the occasion, Mr. Boghali said that the visit contributes to strengthening bilateral relations, which have been marked by a new dynamic, notably since the state visit paid by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, to Portugal, thereby praising the historic relations based on friendship and solidarity between the two countries. He recalled Algeria's support for Portugal during the Carnation Revolution in 1974, praising the inclusion in the Portuguese constitution of the principle of support for the right of peoples to self-determination. Regarding the bilateral cooperation, Mr. Boghali stressed the importance of exchanging expertise in the constitutional field, highlighting Algeria's interest in the experience of the Portuguese Constitutional Court. He also called for the strengthening of economic relations as a lever for promoting political relations, particularly in light of the new investment law, which grants significant incentives to foreign investors. The Speaker of the Portuguese Constitutional Court, for his part, expressed his gratitude for the warm welcome he received, which he said was a testimony of the deep friendship existing between the two countries, recalling that Algeria was among the first countries to support Portugal in its fight against dictatorship and colonialism. He also emphasized his commitment to give a new impetus to cooperation between the two countries, notably within the United Nations, where the two countries coordinate their efforts.
A session of the Interparliamentary Union Executive Committee has kicked off in Olympia, Greece, with the participation of a delegation from the National or the Council of the Nation. Participants to the session, which will last until July 1st, will examine organizational and financial issues, as well as other issues related to the situation of certain member parliaments, such as the adoption of the report of the last meeting of the Executive Committee and the examination of proposed amendments to the Union's statutes. They will also examine the IPU's overall vision on the mechanisms adopted to address crises that threaten international peace and security, in addition to assessing the effectiveness of its policy based on political, institutional, and programmatic mechanisms. The committee members stress the need to adopt more effective mechanisms to end conflicts around the world and called for promoting the role of parliaments in establishing peace by strengthening parliamentary mediation in conflict resolution. You also listen to Radio Algeria International, and former diplomat and U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton has said that the Western Sahara issue remains one of the greatest injustices yet to be addressed, despite the clarity of international law on this issue and Security Council resolutions calling for respect for the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination. Amina Bawisha has the details.
In an interview with the Spanish website Otra Lectura, Bolton noted that the situation in the Sahrawi territories has not progressed due to Morocco's obstinacy and its refusal to allow a free and fair self-determination referendum. He pointed out that since the ceasefire was announced in 1991 and the establishment of the United Nations mission for the referendum in Western Sahara, MINURSO, there has been an agreement in principle to hold a referendum based on the population census conducted by Spain in 1974. Despite the technical simplicity of this procedure, Morocco has repeatedly obstructed the operation, fearing that the result of the referendum would not serve its expansionist ambitions, he stressed. The former diplomat, who reiterated the urgent need for the fulfillment of the international community's commitment to the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination, criticized Rabat's attitude, which is trying to gain time and change the demographic composition of the occupied Sahrawi territories through the transfer of Moroccan populations to these territories. Mr. Bolton also dwelt on the legal and moral issues surrounding the Sahrawi issue, asserting that true sovereignty cannot be imposed through force or brutal annexation, but rather draws its legitimacy from the free will of the people. He also drew attention to the disinformation campaigns carried out by Morocco and some of its allies to tarnish the image of the Polisario Front, stating that attempts to associate the front with terrorist and extremist groups are nothing more than disparate propaganda without tangible evidence and contradict what he has personally witnessed since his first visit to the Sahrawi refugee camps over 30 years ago. John Bolton also notes that Rabat has not hesitated to use lobbies to exert pressure in a number of European and American capitals to impose its vision on the Sahrawi question and promote its so-called autonomy plan, hoping to replace the self-determination referendum.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and meanwhile, the former American diplomat mentioned Morocco's illegal exploitation of Western Sahara's natural resources through the establishment of fishing agreements covering Sahrawi waters with foreign companies, as well as agreements facilitating the plundering of Sahrawi phosphate. He emphasized that all agreements concerning the resources of Sahrawi territories were illegal from the perspective of international law, as long as the status of Western Western Sahara had not been definitely resolved. Finally, Mr. Bolton affirmed that the only just and lasting solution to the Sahrawi issue lies in the implementation of UN resolutions, notably through the holding of a referendum on self-determination under the aegis of the United Nations. And now to the Middle East. At least one Palestinian was killed in bombardments carried out today by the Israeli army or occupation forces against an aid distribution center in Zaytun, south of Gaza. According to UN reports, over 550 people have been killed by the Israeli occupying forces while trying to have access to food in distribution sites set up in the territory. The aid distribution plan backed by the Israeli occupying authorities and the US has been bitterly criticized by the UN and by humanitarian organizations, denouncing what they call a deadly trap for the Palestinians. They affirm that the plan, which has caused forced displacement, was tantamount to deliberate attempt to citizens' dignity. In this connection, UNRWA once again stressed that it was urgent that a ceasefire is reached and the Israeli blockade on the Gaza Strip be lifted. In a message posted on social media, the UNRWA spokesperson denounced the ban imposed by the Israeli occupying authorities on the activities of the agency since March 2nd. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. It's worth recalling that since then, an all-out blockade has been imposed by the Israeli occupying authorities, preventing the entry of humanitarian aid into the enclave. This came as Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi today affirmed that peace in the Middle East could not be achieved unless an independent Palestinian state is set up within the 1967 borders with occupied Jerusalem as its capital. In a speech made on the occasion on the 12th anniversary of the country's revolution, he deplored the escalation of conflicts in several Arab countries, stressing the necessity to put an end to the destruction and the sufferings of the peoples of the region. And now the head of the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, has affirmed that investing in development is essential to create peace conditions by calling for increased aid to countries of the Global South in the face of multiplying international conflicts. Masoud Sharfi.
The acting administrator of the UNDP, Hou Yang-shu, emphasized the importance of recognizing that development sets the foundation for peace. He explained that investment in defense, trade, development, and international cooperation should not be seen as a zero-sum game. Supporting stability and stabilization efforts in fragile countries can help reduce pressure in other countries facing various challenges. A report published in mid-June by the Peace Research Institute Oslo, PRIO, indicated that 61 conflicts occurred worldwide last year, affecting 36 countries, some of which experienced multiple conflicts at once. This represents the highest number of armed conflicts since 1946. The UN warns that rising military spending in conflict-affected countries is hindering development. With 2 billion people, 70% of the world's poor, living in these areas. Military expenditures reached a record of $2.7 trillion in 2024, up to 20% from 2023.
At the initiative of the UN, international experts and leaders are meeting in Spain for a conference on development financing, which has been undermined by global crises and drastic budget cuts in the United States, which will not be participating in the meeting. Mariam Barshi.
At least 50 heads of states and government are attending the 4-day meeting alongside the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, and 4,000 representatives of the civil society. The aim of the conference, known as the FFD4, which is the fourth of the kind since 2002, is to find solutions for countries in the Global South, which, according to the United Nations, face an estimated financing gap of $4 trillion per year in order to meet their sustainable development goals. During the opening of the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, FFD4, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres stressed that the Sevilla Commitment document is a global promise to fix how the world supports countries as they climb the development ladder.
The Sevilla Commitment is a global promise to fix how the world supports countries as they climb the development ladder. I see 3 areas of action. First, we must get resources flowing fast. Countries must lead by mobilizing domestic resources and investing in areas of greatest impact: schools, healthcare, social protection, decent work, and renewable energy. Unlocking these investments requires strengthening tax systems and tackling illicit financial flows and tax evasion, and helping developing countries dedicate a greater share of their tax revenue to the systems people need. The Seville commitment calls on developed countries to double their aid dedicated to domestic resources mobilizations to support this. Multilateral and national development banks must unite to finance major investments.
That was the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres.
The UN World Food Programme has said that critical shortfalls in global humanitarian funding now threaten millions of Sudanese refugees fleeing war to seek refuge in neighboring countries. Amina Barisha.
The UN agency noted that the situation for many Sudanese refugees is already dire. More than 2 years since war erupted between Sudan's army and paramilitary rapid support forces. In Uganda, many vulnerable refugees are surviving on less than 500 calories a day, less than a quarter of daily nutritional needs, as new arrivals train refugee support systems. In Chad, which hosts almost a quarter of the 4 million refugees who fled Sudan, food rations will be reduced in the coming months without new contributions. Children are particularly vulnerable to sustained periods of hunger, and malnutrition rates among young refugees in reception centers in Uganda and South Sudan have already breached emergency thresholds. According to WFP, refugees are already severely malnourished even before arriving in neighboring countries to receive emergency assistance. WFP Emergency Coordinator for the Sudan Regional Crisis said this is a full-blown regional crisis that's playing out in countries that already have extreme levels of food insecurity and high levels of conflict. Millions of people who have fled Sudan depend wholly on support from WFP. But without additionally funding, the UN agency will be forced to make further cuts to food assistance, which will leave vulnerable families and particularly children at increasingly severe risk of hunger and malnutrition.
And back to Algeria, the Algerian national anthem Qasaman was the focus of a conference organized to mark the 70th anniversary of its composition, coinciding with the global poetry movement supporting the Palestinian cause around the world. On this occasion, I invite you to listen to a program devoted to the life of the poet of the Algerian Revolution, Mufti Zakaria.
قالت جزائرنا الغالية وقالت جزائرنا الغالية هو الصدق حقق آمالية ومن دم شعبي وأكباده إلى النصر قدمت قربانية وجندت من خالد بن الوليد وسعد بن وقاص أبطالية.
Mufti Zakaria was born on June 12, 1908 in the province of Ghardaya, southern Algeria, in the region of Beni Yizgan, and his real name is Sheikh Zakaria bin Sliman bin Yahya bin Sheikh Sliman bin Haj Isa, but later his literary nickname became Mufti. He studied in a school in the Mzab region, then moved to Tunis to pursue his studies in the Salam School, Al Khalduniya School, and then to the University of Zaytuna. Mufti Zakaria used to attend literary gatherings held in Tunisia by writers and poets, notably Al-Arbi Al-Kabadi, Abu Al-Qasim Al-Shabi, and Ramadan Hamoud. His first poem was entitled To the People of the Countryside and was published in Tunisian and Egyptian newspapers in 1925. Mufti Zakaria used his poetry as a weapon to accompany militarism and nationalist movements in the Maghreb region then. He actively took part in the North Africa Students' Congress and militated in Algeria within the North African Star and then in the Algerian People's Party, where he becomes one of its major leaders. His fight and nationalist positions led to his imprisonment by the then French colonizer between 1937 and 1939. Following the outbreak of the glorious November Revolution on November 1, 1954, he joined the first cell of the National Liberation Front in Algiers. He is then arrested, tried, and sentenced to 3 years of detention from 1956 to 1959. When freed from prison, he left the Algerian territory to Morocco, then to Tunisia to be taken care of by Dr. Frans Fanon due to torture he was subjected to by the French colonial authorities. In addition to several patriotic poems, notably the Song of the Martyrs, the Song of the National Liberation Army, the Song of the Algerian Students' Union, and the Song of the Algerian Woman, Mufti Zakaria wrote the Algerian national anthem Qasaman while in prison. He also wrote prose, notably the history of the Arab press in Algeria, the theatre play The Grand Revolution, The White Book, and many others. Mufti Zakaria became the spokesperson of the Algerian cause in the Maghreb region through the Tunisian, Moroccan, and Orient press during the Arab Poetry Festival held in Damascus in 1961. After Algeria's independence on July 5, 1962, Mufti Zakaria lives in several Maghreb countries and dies in 1977 in the Tunisian capital, Tunis. His body is then transferred to Algeria to be buried in Beni Yezgin, but his soul lives forever in the memory of every Algerian.
Welcome to your weekly program, Destination Algeria. I'm Jamal Slimani. There are a number of great destinations in Algeria and waiting to be discovered. A curious mixture of cultures and influences. Algeria has something interesting to see in just about every city. The country is also the first largest on the African continent, so you can be sure that there are plenty of towns and cities to visit. Let's visit Algeria's fascinating destinations, you and I together. Stories of dinosaurs have long fueled the imaginations of humans, with ongoing discoveries in different parts of the world providing more information on these gigantic prehistoric creatures and offering theories on what led to their extinction. Fossilized remains of dinosaurs have been found in a number of North African countries, including here in Algeria. With each discovery being important in piecing together the history of the various species of dinosaurs and their habitats. Fossils of the genus Brachiosaurus were first discovered in the Grand River Canyon of western Colorado, United States, and were described in 1903 by American paleontologist Elmer Riggs, who declared it to be the largest known dinosaur at the time. Fossil remains were discovered in the Sahara Desert of eastern Algeria and were assigned in 1960. The genus Brachiosaurus with the species Nogardi distinguishing it from other dinosaurs in the genus, although there is some dispute as to whether this classification is correct. Fossils recovered from the site included a scrum, some phalanges, and some of the left metacarpals. The scrum, a triangular bone at the base of the spine in the back part of the pelvis, measured a length of 130 centimeters for 4 vertebrae, being exceptionally large compared with Brachiosaurus species discovered elsewhere. Named for the country where it was first discovered, fossil remains of the Niger-saurus have been found in Niger, Tunisia and southern Algeria. It was first described by French paleontologist Philippe Taquet in 1976. The skeleton and skull of this plant-eating dinosaur is filled with airspace, making it light and somewhat delicate and not able to withstand the ravages of time and the elements. And it was only in 2005 that a fuller description of the skull and feeding habits of the Niger-saurus was made. Scientists Paul Sorino and Jeffrey Wilson noted that the Niger-saurus had as many as 500 to 600 teeth set in up to 50 columns along the front edges of the jaw. As one set of teeth was sworn down by the dinosaur's fibrous diet, it was immediately replaced by another set, which most likely happened on a monthly basis. Fossils of more than 36 different types of dinosaurs have been discovered in Algeria, including the largest meat-eating dinosaur known to have lived on the earth. The study of these amazing creatures is both fascinating and complex, opening a window to the prehistoric past of Algeria, this North African country. Today, in the second part, we introduce you to Algerian artist Mohamed Zmirli. He was born in the province of Tizi Ouzou on the 18th of February 1909. Having been orphaned at a young age, he had to leave school to earn a living, which he did by painting peacocks and roosters on items of furniture. At the age of 15, he managed to make his way to Algiers, where he discovered his talent for the fine arts, completing his first still life painting in 1930. Beginning what was to be a successful career, during which time he made a significant contribution to the cultural and artistic heritage of his home country of Algeria. Mohamed Zmirli held his first exhibition in 1935 and regularly exhibited his works at various events, including those organized by the Union of Artists of North Africa, the Société des Arts et Lettres d'Algérie, and Artistes Libres. He was said to be a great admirer of the works of Algerian artist Mohamed Rassim, who was renowned for his miniaturist paintings and was considered to be the founder of this unique style of art. In 1944, he met with Mohamed Rassim, where the subject of an exhibition of Rassim's students and other Muslim painters was discussed. In collaboration with the newly established Cercle Franco-Musulman, the first exhibition of its kind was arranged in Algeria, where the works of 13 artists were displayed in an event that was a great success. This led to various cultural exchange programs with other countries.